Hi everyone, this video will talk about something which has been raised a lot in some of my videos. It's archery safety and notably controlling the shooting line. The reason why I say this is people raise examples in videos where they see someone in the background walking past or walking to the target while somebody else is shooting in my video. And they'll say, you know, what an idiot, there's live shooting going on, you should be stopping, you can't do that. And I get why people might react this way, but it's also something which isn't as dangerous as it looks. Now, understand firstly, rules and regulations are paramount. It's actually a really good thing that people are pointing out this potential safety infringement. As a shooting sport, we take safety extremely seriously. Even though bows aren't guns, many archery ranges run to the same level of strictness as a gun range. So that priority of safety and everyone being a safety is a good thing. I'm definitely not annoyed at people pointing it out. I will praise you and say you've done a great thing by talking about safety. That's something we should always be talking about. It's safety. And because these safety guidelines and rules are codified in clubs and ranges and associations, I understand why people might be outraged when they see someone seemingly breach it so carelessly. I want to make it clear that what I'm saying here and explaining here doesn't override your range rules. Those rules come first. It's a responsibility of the field captain or the range director or the directive shooting to enforce these rules, but also your responsibility as an individual archer to ensure that what you are doing is safe, and if there's any concern, it should be voiced. Now, with that said, why is it that I tend to be a little casual about people walking behind the target or walking to the target while I'm shooting, while other people are shooting, or while I'm defensive of people who are doing so? As I said before, bows aren't guns, and while accidents can happen, while equipment can fail, there is a reasonable amount of common sense and likelihood which governs how strictly we enforce separation. This may be a little controversial, but with firearms, there is a greater amount of unpredictability. With firearms, you can never really know what's going to happen. You can't see if the gun is loaded. You can't tell if the person has their finger on the trigger. So at any point, if you get painted by a muzzle, then you have a good reason to be freaked out, because it may be loaded and you always assume a weapon is loaded and the person may have the finger on the trigger. So anything could happen. If a malfunction or a misfire, incorrect handling can result in a negligent discharge, and these things are definitely dangerous and the consequences can be fatal. So here there is no arrow on the bow. There's no assumption that it's loaded. It's not loaded. You can't see any arrow here. So I don't feel bad with waving the bow in front of you, because I'm doing this for demonstration purposes and there's no risk of an accidental discharge. The bow can't shoot you. Now, if I have an arrow on the bow, things get a little more interesting. So now we have you might say, a loaded weapon. In this case, you would take things a bit more seriously. And to be perfectly clear, it is not okay to pull the string back with the bow pointed at anything other than a target. Again, I'm demonstrating here my safe space. I know there's nothing here that can be hit, but I wouldn't do this on a line, and there are strict rules about pulling the bow back when off the line. Now, at long distance, you can't tell. So if someone's fetching arrows behind the target and somebody is on the line doing a practice draw without an arrow, we can't tell. So that's why when I'm controlling the line, I make it very clear, nicely, to remind people to not do that, because we get a little anxious about that. And that's fair. So when you have a line of shooters, you want to make sure everyone's doing the right thing. Not just for safety, but to give peace of mind. But one thing which really drives archery safety is common sense. Now, I know common sense isn't that common, but what I'm saying is that when you are standing on the line in the space you were in, you can tell what is within acceptable risk. While equipment failures do happen, they're not as drastic or as unpredictable as for firearm. Perhaps the worst accidents will happen with compound bows, and this is notably when someone accidentally punches the trigger on the release date, or the release date fails and the arrow goes off without intentional discharge. That's perhaps the most unpredictable accident. But if we're following the same rules of only drawing on target, then the arrow will only fly straight towards the target. And same thing, if I have a bad shot on the recurve, it's only going to go within a certain cone from my position towards the target. Assuming I'm not doing anything stupid like pointing the wrong direction, it will only go in one direction. So even on a bad shot, even on an accidental release, it's not going to go away from the target. Because of this fairly predictable cone, many ranges for casual shooting, for unsupervised shooting, will have rules in place which will dictate target separation, which allows for independent shooting. Normally on a shooting line with many people, such as a class or a competition or simply a lot of people, you need someone to be the director of shooting to control the line, so everyone shoots together. Even without a director of shooting, archers shooting close together will coordinate so that they don't interfere with someone else's shooting. So if I'm shooting with a target right next to me over here, then I will make sure when I finish, I will wait until they finish, and vice versa. We might agree on a certain number of arrows and then we can fetch the arrows together, or we might just nod and say, okay, we're done, so we'll get the arrows. So there's an informal arrangement in that case. But in cases where there are fewer people on the line and the targets are separated more generously, then it actually is completely safe to move forward to fetch arrows independently. The specific guidelines may differ between ranges, and by the way, this is normally an outdoor thing. Indoor, it's almost never done because of the greater space restrictions, so more people shooting at the same time, the same line. But for outdoor, with a very wide field, then you don't have to worry about someone who is like 20 meters away from you, because your worst possible scenario can't happen at that distance, at that angle. Now, the guideline in many cases, to be conservative, would be about 10 degrees or 15 degrees from center. So if that's my target right here, then we assume the danger zone or the risk zone is about 15 degrees from here, and that's spread out away from the position of the shooter. So if I'm shooting at 10 meters and somebody else next to me is shooting 10 meters and they're, say, 5 meters away from me, then they are well outside my cone. So if they're fetching their arrows, then I'm not going to hit them. Even with my worst possible shot, I'm not going to go anywhere near that person. The only way I would shoot that person is if I intentionally did so, and no amount of range control would prevent that. Now, if we're shooting longer distances, or one of us is shooting a longer distance, then we need to pay more attention to that cone. So if I'm shooting, let's say, 50 meters, and my partner is shooting 10 meters at a different target, and he's on the next lane, I can't go and fetch my arrow when he's shooting, because by walking forward to fetch my arrow, then I'm going to fall within his cone. So if he overshoots, or if he shoots to the side, I'm in the danger zone. So in that case, it's clear with the club guidelines, the range rules, that we should not be shooting independently. We should either be shooting with a greater lane separation, or we coordinate our shooting. And likewise, if two of us are shooting at, say, 50 meters or 70 meters at the same time in different lanes, I can't go ahead and fetch it, because the moment I walk forward, I'm going to be within that cone of fire. So that's why in many videos you'll see people casually walking forward to fetch arrows. It's because there is a very large level of separation, way in excess of the minimum guidelines, and that's because most of us will follow common sense. Do bear in mind that what you see on camera, it can be distorted by the position, the angle, and the lens, so it may look a lot closer than it actually is. That's actually a similar reason why people got a little angry about Lindy Page when I made the video about him shooting. There are people working in the background. It's actually not as dangerous as it looks on camera, because we have a 10-meter target, we have acceptable range, distance, and we have an angle separation. So the people in that space will know, not just from common sense, but from what is physically possible with their equipment, whether something's within acceptable guidelines. Again, your range rules are paramount. If your range doesn't allow for independent shooting, even with separation, then those things are paramount, they come first. But understand that that's why people do these things. It's not because we're risk takers or we're like ignoring rules. It's because the rules allow it, and the risk which has been evaluated by the range does specify what is within acceptable limits. And every archer I know is quite conservative with safety. Like in luck with a lot of firearms shooters who are responsible, the majority who are responsible, then you know that you wouldn't do things if it presents a danger to somebody else. And same with me, same with other archers. If I don't feel comfortable with someone fetching arrows, even though they are outside that cone, then I won't shoot. I'll just let them fetch the arrows, then I'll finish. Likewise, if I don't feel safe fetching arrows, I'll wait till they finish. And it's normally a very easy understanding and communication. Communication is important to you, by the way. If there's any concerns, express it. And that way, if you can separate more, then you can. But most people will know that something's unsafe. I know it's a bit of an assumption, but I'm also assuming that most of us are functional adults with brains, and therefore we can make our own judgment. And if somebody else might be a bit of risk, then I won't fetch the arrow and I won't shoot while they're there. But if someone I know who's a regular member who is very safe, then we know that we're going to be fine. And again, I'm not going to go, oh, he always shoots gold, so we'll never miss at 50 meters. I'm not going to do that. Just because someone might be a state champion and never misses that gold doesn't mean you can walk next to their target and fetch arrows while they're shooting. We know that's dumb. But at the same time, because we know that we are competent shooters, it's okay if we're far enough to shoot independently. And that's basically it. It's there because ranges often don't have that many people on them at the same time, and because a club environment might have a very close-knit community, we all follow the same safety rules, there aren't any strangers, then we can operate more freely within looser safety parameters. It doesn't mean it's dangerous or more dangerous, but it means that there is a greater level of trust on each person to follow safety guidelines and common sense. Now, obviously, in public ranges, this may be forbidden because there's no supervisor or you just don't trust each other. And of course, shooting in controlled environments where you have a packed shooting line or an indoor range which is filled up, then you must follow coordinated shooting. But when shooting casually with few people around, common sense safety is important and is typically followed. I know some of you disagree and say, no, a bow is a weapon, you must respect the weapon, you can't do that. I understand that, but in these cases, the clubs and ranges have evaluated a safety risk and have decided that it's not that dangerous of what we're using. As long as people are following these rules and not taking risks which are unnecessary, then it's acceptable. My point is, it's not as dangerous as it looks. Again, the camera might be deceiving, the distances might be deceptive, but we don't hold the same rules exactly as firearms and gun ranges, because bows aren't exactly the same thing. Most important though, the fact that you're thinking about safety is the lesson that is to be learned. So remember, follow your range rules, follow common sense safety, and if you don't feel it's safe, then voice it, communicate, and make sure there's understanding and no misunderstanding. Because you might not miss, but you can misunderstand. Anyway, I hope this provides some insight. I know many of you will still follow the same rules, and that's completely fine, but it's not as bad as it looks, and hopefully this makes some sense to you. Don't freak out too much. Again, most people who communicate, who understand each other, will know what is safe and what is not safe. I think it's only when you work with people who you don't know, that's when things really get wayward. If this is something which hasn't been established at your club or your range, have this conversation, do codify it as a guideline or a rule or a policy so there's no miscommunication over what is and isn't allowed. Anyway, thanks for watching, hope this helps. I'm NUSensei, and hopefully you shoot safe wherever you are.